So I am here with Anita Davenport, the visionary founder of Single Tree Lane. Uh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I don't know where you're calling in from, and we're having nice weather today. So instead of storms and cold weather like 30 degrees, it's sunny and hot.
That's great. Like, yeah, the weather has been crazy, like all over. How did you get into the fashion industry?
Um, I would say it's a lifelong journey because I've always been about fashion, even in elementary school. So it started for me very, very young, um, with collecting. When I grew up in school, so we collected all the designer jeans that they had out then, and wearing dittos because I grew up in Southern California, so whole different vibe.
Right.
Um, yeah, than the rest of the nation, and even from Northern California. So I lived very close to, not that far, like 30 minutes away from the beach. So it was that kind of chill environment, Ocean Pacific. We had jam shorts that were, board shorts. It was very different, but I was always into fashion from a young age. I actually learned to sew as well and took home ec. So it's always been in my blood. The only thing that stopped me from pursuing it as a career option is getting married and having kids.
Oh, so like, what was like, first, like you talked about growing up in California. How did that influence like your style? Because like, especially like growing up so close to the beach.
Yeah, so very much a hippie. So there's a lot of hippie influence in some of the items that I make. And if you go through my catalog, which I know is very vast, there are over 1,000 products. I do have a lot of hippie influence things because that was when I grew up. So I have that influence, 70s, 80s, 90s kind of
Wow.
fashion, which is what people are repeating now,
Right.
is what I grew up originally wearing. So yeah, it's weird to see that. And I have daughters, so it's really weird to see what they like. And I'm like, yeah, I wore that in the 70s. So
What would be your advice to, people who do get married and kind of like give up on like a passion they had?
what I found, I'm a lifelong learner. So I was always studying and always learning something, even if I couldn't apply it right then and there. So with my kids, I actually homeschooled them for the first 5 years. So they didn't have preschool or any of that or daycare outside of the house. I did everything, including teaching them to read. So and sign language and math and logic and reasoning. They also learned a foreign language while at home. So I took my role as a parent very seriously, and I was fortunate enough to be in a situation where I could afford to stay home, which was very big for me when getting married. I made that clear to my suitors that I would be a stay-at-home mom. I was raised by a stay-at-home mom, and my mom used to also homeschool us and teach us at home. And so it's just always stay on top of your passions, whatever it is, read about it. And then once your kids are a certain age, past their school age, you have basically the whole day when you're a stay-at-home mom. So yeah, you can read a lot of things you can take. So I took up hobbies. So I used to have horses,
Oh, wow.
and I was basically self-taught. So I had one horse. I hired a coach for that. And so from that, I went on to buy 6 more horses and train them myself. And
Wow.
that was from books and videos. So it was
Wow.
my foundational, plus I'm into natural horsemanship. So then it was books and videos that I, would watch and read and just apply those techniques to my horses. So that became like my day job when my kids were school aged.
What are your thoughts about like, like in society now? Like I feel, there's a lot of arguments about like, whether like men and women should split the bills, like, people like, being, stay-at-home moms. Do you feel like,
What I'm about to say is probably going to be seen as controversial. Um, but I believe I'm very traditional. I believe it's the man's responsibility to provide for the family. Now, there are women who want to work, and that's fine. And I've watched a lot because I'm on social media a lot, and I've heard that argument back and forth. And where men will say, if my wife wants to work, that's her choice, but that's her money, right? What I make is what we use for the kids in the household and everything. So it's whatever you just decide to do. But for me personally, I do think the man should pay.
Hmm. Yeah, like I agree with you. Like I don't think that's controversial at all. Like, I understand like there are people who probably would like disagree, but like I could see like where that would make sense. A big focus on single tree lane is in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, why is that important to you?
Well, I would say growing up where I did in Southern California, I grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods, went to predominantly white schools where I was usually the only one or one of two, and the second one being my brother. So we didn't see, I grew up not seeing a lot of Black people. I didn't see Black people like on television. Later on, yeah, we had, good times and things like that. But
Yeah,
that wasn't
yeah, that wasn't common
traditional.
back then. Yeah.
Yeah, so you didn't see it. So when the Cosby Show came along and they started doing more shows of people of color, it's nice to see yourself represented. And especially like the Cosby Show, because they were educated people with, with degrees and a doctor and a lawyer, because we didn't get to see those things. I grew up in that type of household, but I didn't see them on TV. I didn't see kids who look like me living the experience that I was living. And also, I'm also multi-ethnic. So my background is varied. And we know more about my mom's side than my dad's side because my mom, that oral history was always passed down. And we also hired a genealogist at one point
Oh,
to
cool.
trace things, yeah, way back.
Mhm.
So that was interesting also to find out that part of our heritage. So I believe in my motto is love all, serve all. And I'm a representative of that. I tell people, I said, I am the world because I am literally 9 things.
That's
So yeah, yeah.
can you tell me a little bit about your ancestry? How far were you able to go back in your genealogy?
All the way back to Roman times.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. So that was on my mom's side. So that's why I said we know a lot on her side. On my dad's side, they really didn't talk about it. My dad's father, my grandfather, was very private about his youth and growing up. All I know that he served in the war, and I would assume World War II, but you know, and war changes people. And so he
Right.
was very hush hush. His father had been killed when he was very, very young. He was one of, I think it was 16 children. It was a lot. And his mom was raising them all, so I can only imagine what he went through. Um, but we didn't know a lot about his background. We didn't know a lot about his wife's background, my grandmother. All I knew is like my grandfather, he literally could pass as white. And people thought he was white until he would open his mouth. So,
What
you know,
what needs to
yes.
change in the fashion industry as far as like with diversity?
Well, I think elevating more diverse companies and helping them to rise up and be at that level of, you see some of these top designers and most of them are white and white male, and so there's not a lot of Black people at the top, and when they are, it's a Black male, so there's not females that are at that level. And so that's my goal, is to be that.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that's like, just a reason for
well
it?
Well, studies have been shown that people are naturally biased to those who look like them, and those are the ones they're first to encourage because that's very similar to them. So I understand that, and there are more opportunities for people of color and even females of color. So there are like we call it not think tanks, incubators, right? But it's still not at the level where they'll take you from nuts to bolts, from A to Z
Right.
in the process, even like apparel, because there's a lot of levels within apparel and getting a garment made. And that still hasn't happened. I joined Target accelerators, but I wasn't accepted into the program.
Okay.
But they are focused on bringing minority businesses into Target. So that's something I would like to do. Macy's also has a program like that, which I haven't been accepted to that, but I haven't applied to that one because that would require me to move to New York. So I mean, there's, as I said, it's, I think And there are Black entrepreneurs who are doing really well. So it'd be great if they created their own incubators and help their own.
Right, for sure. You have some collections. They're called Be Black, the Divine Feminine and Eastern Elegance. Can you talk about those and just the inspiration behind them?
Well, for Be Black, that's basically what the name says. It's Afrocentric. It's about Black people and representing Black faces. So it's either Black faces or Black art. Divine Feminine, of course, because I want women to remember their divinity, and I want them to see art that in them that depicts strong women. And the Eastern Elegance, which is my Asian focus line, is because again, I'm all of those things.
Right.
And I've always been attracted before I knew I had Asian. I was always attracted to Asian art. I even have an Asian art collection in my home. So once I found out that I did actually have Asian, I said it makes sense because you're attracted to what you are. A lot of times, whether it's the people you find attractive or it's the art you find attractive or the clothing. And so that's what brought me into those. These are things I was already designing. I just decided to really hone in on it and focus on it because, as I say, representation is important. And to see people that look like you on clothes and on art, because everything that I make could literally be turned into wall art, so visual arts that you could put on your wall. Not just because they are walking pieces of art.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like I just went to the Getty Center and they had a really interesting connections to Asia series. What's next for you?
A lot of things. So, um, so part of I want to expand. So part of that is talking to investors and investment groups. So that will be the next stage for me, so that I can actually have retail locations. And part of that is not just opening anywhere. You've got to do the market research, and that takes money. And I want to do pop-ups around the country. Yeah. And a lot of advertising and mailers and all of that. So that takes a lot of money, which is why I'm looking for investors and have partnered with a firm who will handle that for me. So
Oh,
they'll revise my pitch decks. I already have a pitch deck that's online, and that's how some have found me. But I decided that I didn't want to go with the first offer.
okay.
I wanted to be shopped around and to have people bidding on, who wants to work with me.
Wow, that's amazing. How important is it, when you find partners, to find somebody because obviously ownership is so important, you know,
Mhm.
uh, who you partner with, how do you decide, if somebody is integrity or, the character that you want?
So I've equated it to, it's very much like finding a romantic partner, because you're basically married to them for however many years, because a lot of them have an idea of an exit plan. They're not going to support you financially forever. They want,
Right.
5 years, 10 years, 7 years, whatever it is. They want to know when it's going to end so they can recoup their money. So I actually said that to one person I was talking to. He was the representative for a firm I was talking to. And I said, if you were to sell your shares, I need to have first right of refusal, because if I buy you out, then I get to choose who you're going to bring on, because I said it's very much a marriage. And I'm very careful about who I get into bed with.